Hello and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hacks podcast. My name is Matthew Head. If you ever wondered how dyslexia affects your vision, well, you've now picked the right episode. Today we have Bhavin Shah on. He is a behavioural optometrist and the owner of Central Vision Opticians in London, which is a multi-award-winning practice and specialises in dyslexia and vision. Let's get into what he's got to tell us about how vision can be affected by dyslexia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you for having me on.
That's okay.
The vision and dyslexia it's fascinating. Now, you've had this kind of myth of how words move around on the page or the letters jumble. So what's really important actually that dyslexia is not a visual condition.
Yeah,
but you're much more likely to have visual problems that are happening. And what's happening is as we're moving our eyes, as we're focusing, our eyes are working together, what happens is if you're dyslexic, you're much more likely to have a difficulty with coordination of your eyes.
Right.
And
okay.
What happens is that the brain thinks our eyes are still and are working on a stable way, but they're not. So when it looks at the page, it actually then has to assume that the words are moving and not our eyes.
It's like the hardware driving the eyes doesn't quite drive them in the right way. And then the other bit goes, oh, well, it's got to be the words moving, not my eyes pointing 2 degrees away from center.
Yes, it will actually make you perceive as if the words are moving and not your eyes. Because your eyes can't be moving, the body assumes everything's working perfectly well.
Yes.
So that's a common reason why we get those. But actually, seeing words moving, it tends to it's not hugely common. It is some dyslexics do get it, but what tends to happen often it will be that we'll more likely to lose our position or end up on the wrong word, or we'll skip a word while we're reading. Those things are much more likely to happen. And again, it's part of the same thing that if we haven't got complete stability with the ways our eyes are working, the brain sometimes finds it difficult to manage all that. So what it does is it will pick up some information, but it may miss other bits. It's a bit like, I don't know if this happened to you. You're looking for your pen on your desk.
Yeah.
You're looking everywhere for it and you can't see it.
Yeah.
And then the moment you stop looking for it, you realize it was there all along.
Yes.
So
have you ever seen,
experienced that?
I used to be a mechanic. Have you ever seen the memes that go around with the pie chart, and it's the 5% the time spent on the job, and then 95 looking for the spanner I literally put down 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So at that time, your brain's not quite processing all that information. It thinks it is. It makes it look all perfectly clear, but actually, it's not taking in all that detail. And when you're looking, sometimes if there's a bit of instability, you'll miss out words. And that's, again, it's not dyslexia yourself, but you're much more likely to have, if you're dyslexic, you're much more likely to have these difficulties.
Okay. So I'm just going to dive into, I thought we sort of have a bit of a clarification. What's the difference between a behavioural optometrist versus, should we say, a standard one, like a high street? Yeah. I don't know what the actual technical name is.
Yeah, so that's actually, yeah, it's a really important part, because what we do actually, the best analogy I can say is if you imagine you've got loads of kids in a race, you'll get one that will win, one at the end, everybody else will be in the middle. Now, a regular optometrist will be the one who'll give them a new pair of trainers, but actually a new pair of trainers is not going to make you win the race. No. So what a behavioural optometrist will do, will look at all the functions, how the leg's moving, the coordination, the strength, and how we're getting ourselves our pace and all of those elements. So that's what a behavioural optometrist will do. We'll take a much more holistic approach at how the visual system is working.
Okay.
So a lot of people, and I see a lot of dyslexics who would have been to have a routine eye test, been able to read all the way down to the bottom of the chart and been told everything is normal, but actually they're complaining that actually it's not. There's things going on there, but actually at a routine test everything's okay. But actually, if you dig a little bit deeper, then you find that actually there are these instabilities with the way that the eyes are working or moving, or the way we're processing information.
I see. So effectively, your standard optician is sort of looking at the hardware of the eyes itself, as you said, like with giving new running shoes. So here, have another pair of glasses. But you're dealing with the fundamental processing.
The actual software.
Yeah.
So you've actually got, so our body has this hardware, the eyes, the arms, legs, all of those elements. But actually, the software is what develops as we grow.
Mm-hmm.
And what can happen is if the way that the software isn't working, two things are going to happen. It's not sensing what the hardware is giving, the information the hardware is giving, but actually when it then tries to control the hardware, that doesn't come out quite in the right way as expected.
Okay.
And there can be lots of things that are happening in between. It may be that sometimes the memory may not be remembered quite in the right way. There may be a limited amount of memory when it comes to some elements, but some elements the memory may be amazing, where you can remember detail that had happened a long time ago. So it can be lots of little nuances in the way that we're processing information, as well as how we're controlling the hardware and how we're taking the information from the hardware.
Cool. So if I was to turn up your practice, and I normally go to a high street optician's that is named after some footwear, and if I turn up your practice, how would I expect the sort of eye assessment to be different?
There's a few different things. So one of the things is normally either when you've been diagnosed, or if you're about to be diagnosed with dyslexia, or if you're having some of these symptoms, you're kind of struggling with your vision, but everything else is normal, then I would say you need to have an in-depth assessment. So you need to find out all of these elements. So I'll tend to see people at those times, either just when they've either just been diagnosed, or they're about to be diagnosed, or, for example, I've seen someone who was struggling at work.
Yeah.
And again, their sight was normal, but they were still having those difficulties. So then I would want to do an assessment for those people.
So the assessment differs if you suspect or somebody's just been stated with dyslexia versus just Joe Public?
Yeah. So if there've been if there's something that's happening that's not adding up, or something with a difficulty, then I would want to do an assessment, which would maybe kind of like an hour and a half, 2 hours of a kind of a battery of tests that we would go through. We'd take little breaks in between because it's quite a long time, and it's interesting because it gives an understanding of what's happening in someone's visual world.
Yeah. I guess by that point, being a dyslexic person stated, you're used to the EdPsych assessment. It's also like 2 hours worth of grueling maths.
Yeah. So I will see people normally in the morning, and because by the end of the day, it looks like things are much worse than they are.
Yeah.
But it's really. It's a bit like it's the difference between seeing your you wouldn't see your GP for dyslexia.
No.
You'd have to go to an EdPsych and have all those other kind of things working on. And then also the other thing that I find quite exciting is actually you can use your vision to help compensate for other areas where you may be struggling. You can find for kind of strategies. Things like color coding is really, really great for organizing information. I don't know if you use mind maps.
I never used to. I had a bit of a rough introduction to them, and it's only been recently I got reintroduced to them, and I was like, I think what I got was spider diagrams that were called mind maps. But having look at stuff like I did the Davis program beginning of the year, and they reintroduced me to it, made it visual, and then stuff like Bullet Map Academy with their mind maps.
Yeah, they're very good.
I was like, wow, these are actually a better tool. So, I have done. I also remember the color sheets when I was at school.
Yes.
I didn't realize. Well, I guess they do work, but try not to be picked on in class with color sheets over your book.
Yeah. So that's a whole unusual element in itself. I mean, I do the kind of colored lenses and the overlays, but they only really help in about. In my experience, about 10 to maybe 20% of cases.
Oh, okay.
Most of the cases where they're making a difference is more because of the way the eyes are either working together or coordinating.
Yeah.
So something like 95% of cases where if you need a color or a color makes a difference, then it's because of that as an underlying difference. Although for those kids, that 10, 20% where it does make a difference, it makes a huge difference. Sometimes reading speed can be improved by 20, 30%, even more sometimes. So it is a case of trial and error.
Yeah.
And the kind of theory behind it a little bit. Sometimes if you imagine lines of text.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen this before when presenters were wearing stripy shirts on TV. And you'd sometimes get that funny pattern.
Yeah.
So actually for some dyslexics and some people, lines of text give you that same interference.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So a specific wavelength of color will neutralize that interference.
Right, I see.
it is really try and error. Everybody's slightly different on what helps. We have to just try out some of the different things.
Okay, I'm not expecting you to explain the whole process, but I'm just curious how you would how you would go about understanding what the brain is doing with the eyes, just even in general, not necessarily for dyslexia. Versus, obviously, I imagine you still put all the lenses in to see if that helps read the charts.
So we'd do a kind of a battery of tests.
Yeah.
That kind of, again, if you take the kind of running analogy, you'd see what the gait of someone is, what the coordination is, how much strength they've got in their muscles, and a lot of these things we have an idea, or we have kind of good measures, kind of scientific measures of where the limit should be, and if the limit is less than what we expect, then we know that's actually something we need to work on. And in some cases, we may do like an exercise program, which will improve the stamina of certain elements, improve the coordination. Some cases, we can give special glasses that actually make the eyes work in a more coordinated way.
Oh, okay.
So there's some interventions that we would do.
So you can do interventions with just sort of the more general sort of lazy eyes and all that kind of stuff as well, or is that a little bit trickier?
There's an overlap.
Yeah,
there's an overlap. So sometimes a lazy eye may be where one eye's turned in or out, or is not coordinating well. Yeah. So actually, the process of training it is very similar.
Yeah, because I got the full set. I've got the right eye's a lazy eye with an astigmatism, so the left eye does a lot of work.
Okay, so it's doing all that. Yeah. Can you tell it's drifting either in or out?
It doesn't drift too much. It's just pretty much if I put a hand over my right eye, nothing changes, and then swap it to the other side. I'm like, the whole world's a bit blurry, and it takes a minute or two to kind of pull it all back in focus. It's really interesting. I never had patches or anything as a kid, but I go have like a sight test. I'm like 0.5 on the good eye, and then it's the other eye's like, well, we can get you to here.
Oh yeah, okay. So it sounds like you need a bit of training.
Well, maybe
with that eye to get it coordinated.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it as I remember going to hospital as kids. So yeah, picked up dyslexia at 6. I was probably 7, 8, or 9 going to the hospital about lazy eyes, and they just like, you're just born with it. That's how it works. But I never would have. You can train it, because the problem is it makes the symptoms of dyslexia worse, because you're trying to coordinate your eyes, and if you're relying on just one eye doing most of the work, it can be harder than when they're both working together. Okay. So you can lose. So it just makes everything makes efficiency harder, and it can make you more tired more quickly. Oh, okay. Yeah, I could see that. And also it's hard to see right-hand side peripheral vision, which is entertaining when you're driving.
Oh yeah. That's right. So you can drive with where you're relying on one eye, but actually, it takes a bit. So that's one of the things we would work on, actually, is to get that peripheral vision.
Yeah, I think both eyes are legally able to drive. It's just one is so much better than the other.
There's a big difference.
It's bizarre. I've not thought of it as being dyslexia. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's not. It's not. They may have a common root, possibly, even though they're two separate things. But actually, if we were training them for dyslexia, we would train them in the same way as the lazy eye bit first, and then improve the kind of coordination.
Yes, so all the visual input's right, and then you kind of tweak the brain and the other bit of the brain in the background. Okay.
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you neurodiverse at all yourself, or how did you come into contact with dyslexia?
Yeah, so I mean, I got into it originally. I had patients who had difficulties with it, or they were telling me they were having difficulties with their eyes. But when I examined them using my traditional optometry, everything was normal.
So you worked for like a high street?
Yeah, so I was working for a high street. Yeah, so I was working for a high street practice, and when I knew that there was something was a struggle for them, but they were telling me it was, but actually everything was normal. And as I investigated a bit more, I found out actually there's a lot more to the visual system. I do feel sometimes I do have difficulty with some traits like working memory, organization. Sometimes is the best. I've never had a formal assessment, but I use the same strategies that I would help someone with those difficulties to kind of help myself a little bit.
Yeah, you get a few people like that, and I'm like, why do you do that? I do that. Well, mine is mitigation for this trait of mine, and that's because of this. Oh.
Yes, yeah.
And you can see the cogs whirring.
Yeah, maybe somewhere along the line I'll have it assessed and see. I mean, it is quite interesting. So I have seen recently a lot of adults being diagnosed, and several I've seen. I work with one of the universities, and several where they've on their second degree and realised things are a little bit harder than it is for them than it is for everybody else, and they've got a diagnosis. So they've got through one degree really easy. They've gone to do it master's or higher education, and then they've realized that actually something is harder for them than they it should be. Then they've got a diagnosis, which I think is quite fascinating.
Yeah, me too. I'm always really interested to see what it's like to be picked up as an adult. I'm sort of late 30s, and apparently there's people doing secondary in their late 30s. Like, as you quite rightly said, what?
Yeah, that's right. And then they look back and then realize, actually, you know what? There were things that were a struggle. They've found ways to cope with it. They've found strategies which have helped for them. They've just obviously had a mindset where they've been able to manage it and cope with those the things that they've found difficult until they've reached a particular point.
Yes, the problem is that it's almost too clever for our own good sometimes, that we're able to work out all the way around things. And I imagine you've seen every tool and trick in the book for. I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated. Some of the strategies are brilliant, and they'll find something that will help them. Actually, any particular one that's your favourite?
I think just charm. I think is one of the great ones, and if I just having a great way with people, I think goes a long way.
Yes, you've already won them all over already before they've worked out. You can't write them in,
yeah. If you're a nice, that's right. They're a nice person.
Keep you talking to see if you've not noticed anything.
Right.
So you said you obviously were in the high street opticians, and then you started noticing more of the behavioural stuff. So how did you, I'm sort of going to focus more on the dyslexia side of it, but how do you sort of transition from being, I imagine you must have to take a degree for the optometry side of it.
So you've got to do optometry first. And then I think a couple of years of optometry just to get the experience. And then there's a further education. There's the British Association of Behavioural Optometrists, which is our organisation. And you kind of, they have courses. So I followed the courses over a few years. And then I became accredited about 10 years ago. And it's a bit like driving. You learn to drive, and then it's only when you've got your license is actually when the real learning for driving happens. When you've actually hit the road on your own.
Yes,
And I mean the problem is there's only 55 of us or so in the country.
Oh wow, that's just short supply.
There's hardly any of us, which is it's difficult. It's not easy training, and it's quite different to routine optometry. And I think you're working in a multiple company. It's very difficult to be able to apply that knowledge because it takes time, and you've got to spend time with people, and sometimes it doesn't quite fit in with that model. That's why I had to have my own place. I couldn't do it for another company and still spend the time to learn.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then do you? I guess 55, you get together and compare notes, but you had to do a lot of research in the background in terms of dyslexia, or is it more the sort of practical stuff?
So a bit of both. I mean, we have meetings a few times a year where we kind of discuss different cases, and we have keep up to date with whatever the kind of latest research is. So it's a fascinating field. The more you learn, the more there is to learn. There's so many, and there's so many different subtle. No two dyslexics are the same. They've all got their own profile of the way that what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and that's fascinating. You'll find, and I love to see where people find things that they enjoy doing, things that they may be having difficulties with, and working on those.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Like you said, no two people are the same. Do you kind of have a sort of standard protocol that you find specific visual problems that are coming up more or less the same? I know we started this at a bit sort of the top of the podcast episode. I just wondered what you find is more or less the same between got a lot of dyslexics and then the sort of fringe stuff that comes in.
I mean, how the eyes work together and how they move. If there's going to be a visual problem, there tends to be that. The studies show somewhere between 60 to 80% of dyslexics have a difficulty with how their eyes work together.
Mm-hmm.
So that tends to be the most common thing. And then other elements will be just it could be varying degrees of awareness of right and left. Sometimes, like when you're giving directions, take the next right and the next left. Sometimes that can be difficult for some people.
And you can help with the left or right thing, because that's a classic.
Well,
one.
we have to do. So we have to do. We'll just do training to kind of make it more ingrained and more embedded. So we do activities where you've got to do right, left, and get the brain organised from the right and the left side.
Okay. It's interesting. Once I sort of discovered there's various alternative methods to teaching dyslexic people various things, it's fascinating how many different ways there are of approaching the problems and coming up with it. I've never thought of it from an optician's point of view of training left or right, because why would that even come into it?
It's really, really important from a visual point of view to know which is the right side and which is the left side. So visual spatial awareness is really important. When we're reading, what happens is the brain gets this continuous flow of information. But if you've accidentally moved your eyes too far ahead and then moved back, now the brain will receive one word before the next word, or before the word that came before it. So it will jump ahead, then it will see the other word. So the words will then come out of order as far as the brain is receiving it. It thinks it's receiving in the right order, but actually it's received it in the wrong order. And suddenly you've swapped something around.
Okay. Is that the same with letters? So
it can happen with letters as well. Yeah. So letters, it can be a couple of things. It's the way that we've approached it or the way the brain has processed it.
Okay.
As well. So sometimes things can be rights and lefts can be the wrong way around. So it's either the way it's processed it or the way that it's acquired that information. It's taken the information from the wrong direction.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I remember seeing an advertising campaign for something in neurodiversity, and it's like, if you can read this, you're dyslexic, and cool. That's weird. And then I realised it jumbled all the letters.
That's right. Yeah. But you're able to extract, because the information is the same.
Yeah.
But you've managed to extract it.
And I assume a neurotypical reader just goes, huh?
Yeah. Sometimes it can be the
case. So you said about sort of the training with all the corrections. Is that tends to be a training program? Do you find sometimes you have people come in and I've got a prescription from a high street optician and you completely change it or even delete it completely? How does that happen?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it will normally be changed, or we can add elements in there which change the way the world process information. There's something called a prism, which is basically it moves the light but without focusing it. So it can make, particularly what can happen is when we're reading, sometimes the eyes will drop down a little bit, and come back up again, and you may pick up a word from the line below. What happens is if you optically make everything move up very slightly, it can help the coordination of the eyes. Or if you make the world shift in a very slightly different position, the eyes will work better. So in some cases we could add these different elements into lenses. In some cases we can add filters as well. And now the thing is, everybody's slightly different, so we have to kind of see what works best for one person. So for one person it may be amazing. They try it with someone else and they're like, this isn't doing anything. and it's kind of knowing what's working for each person.
I don't know. And I imagine do you get quite quick results in this way, or do they have to come back for multiple?
In many cases, in many cases we'll do it because it sometimes it can be a quick fix. So it can be an easy way to get something working better. It may be that we may have to do an exercise program, but for some people it may be, it may be difficult for them to do, or there's a resistance to doing an exercise. But actually, give them a pair of glasses, and it solves the problem for now.
I see. So it does sound really interesting, just the kind of the whole thought of actually treating the eyes as a holistic system with the brain rather than just bolting glasses on the front of your face and crack on.
Our actual visual system is is part of our brain, really, and it's how the brain processes information. But it also takes in information from the body. It takes in information from the position where we're sitting, our head movements, and all this other information is coming in at the same time, and it's kind of filtering it out and taking a decision on what we're going to do next, how we're going to move. So it's part of the whole thing. And if you're not taking the visual information in properly, then it affects the way you're aware of right and left, or the way your position is, your visual spatial awareness. You may be a little more likely to bump into something, for example, because you don't know quite where the end of your elbow is, where something next to you is. So sometimes you need to kind of retrain all of those elements as well.
So it's all the proprioception comes in. So
proprioception is really important. Yeah. Proprioception feeds into the visual system.
Yes.
And it helps give the visual system stability and an understanding of where your body is. So if your proprioception is unstable, your understanding of your visual world will be unstable as well.
So you do work on that as well? Do you end up with people who are all of a sudden ace athletes by the end of it?
Well, we try and train them to, that balance of proprioception, we try and get that working well before we do anything else. In fact, actually, that bit's really important.
Because I remember as a kid be going out in the playground and bouncing a basketball between me and the teaching assistant for a little while, because I've not been stamped dyslexic or anything like that. It's just straight dyslexia for me. But I always wondered, because I kept throwing these things back and forth, and like, why are we sat here bouncing this ball back, and kind of being rubbish at sports anyway. But I could see where that comes in now. You're sort of training my brain to get the proprioception in the right place.
Yes, and actually you're using a visual stimulus as well at the same time, right? So your brain has to see where the ball is, see where you are, see where you have to get your hands ready in time to catch the ball.
Yeah.
So you've got all that whole system working. Timing and rhythm's really important at that point as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on. You're anticipating where you think the ball's going to end up, because you can't, when it bounces, you can't exactly work out where it's going to end up.
No.
So you've got to keep your eyes on it, and your brain makes that calculation as to where it thinks it's going to go, and then you get your hands there ready at the right time. So it's quite a complicated process, but it's often, if there's little elements that aren't working so well, you practice it, and then you can work and you can improve those things.
You're effectively calibrating, aren't you? I guess.
Yeah. You're literally recalibrating your visual system.
Yeah. Still rubbish at it.
So I mean, I'm pretty much. I'm a big believer in doing activities and sports.
Yes,
is really good for getting fit. I mean, one of the great ones is rock climbing. I don't know if you've ever tried rock climbing.
I haven't, but a few of my friends do. I'm also a 6-footer and really heavy. So it's
perfect, excellent. So it's a challenging activity. Literally, the amount of proprioception you get when you're on that wall, plus add an element of fear in there as well.
Fear's good,
right?
Yeah.
and your brain will be like, I've got to concentrate on what I'm doing. You've got to get the right left coordination working. You've got to get your visual systems planning the route, getting lots of other elements going. So actually, if you do it as a lesson and practice it and get good technique,
sort of deliberate practice,
will improve a lot of these. It'll improve loads of these systems without knowing that you're doing something that's improving.
Yeah,
so
gives you bigger biceps as well, which is a result.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, it makes you fit as well.
So you rock climber yourself then?
No, but I think hopefully when they open up again, I think it's one of the things I want to try and do.
I could certainly see that. It's really interesting. I've obviously never done it, but you've got to like push with the leg and the arms and all that kind of stuff. Right? But I could see,
and you've got to remember which one to move at the right place at the right time
without looking at them.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's a bit like I play guitar and I struggle to not look at my hands while doing it, and it's really weird how you start like forcing yourself to stare out the window, and suddenly your hands know where the neck is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So kind of it's a part of the visual system as well as knowing where your hand is. Your brain's telling your hands to make a particular movement in a particular space in time.
Yes.
And then, but actually you're relying on some visual input there, but actually we want to try and do it without having the visual input.
Yeah, and it plays better if I don't look. I just can't stop my eyes staring.
Yeah, that's right.
So any other sort of sports if people are not into rock climbing then?
So yeah, I mean, anything that requires a lot of physical activity. If there's an element of fear, sometimes can help. So horse riding is one of those that can be quite good because you're going to add good stability, and you're on a horse, which is it's a big animal that you have to really keep your balance and your core working well on there. Anything, again, balance and core, any activities that work on that, I think help stimulate those elements. Maybe a bit less so than the rock climbing.
Oh, okay. So if you're really keen rock climbing, and if you want horse riding on the Saturday after you've been rock climbing on the Friday night, right? I think a ride to a wall and climb up on a cliff face or something. But ride to the rock climbing, do that, and then ride the horse back. You'll have it sorted.
You've got two in one go.
It's funny, isn't it? The benefit of sports and all sorts of things. Like I think we almost underestimate the think of heart and lungs and muscles, depending on what you're doing. But it's it's funny how it pours out into the rest of your ability to do other things.
And on that same thing, talking about the guitar, actually, but I think music as well adds a bit more to that.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think, again, music, you've got that timing and that rhythm. And I mean, music is a particular note at a particular space in time.
Yeah.
So I think it helps with those elements, and also understanding the kind of subtleties in sound when you're playing music can help a lot with language.
Yes, you're sort of training the ears, isn't it? So
it's training the auditory system, and understanding the subtleties and in kind of difference there. I think that can have a good benefit.
Wow. So, well, they say dyslexic people are creative, so I guess picking up musical instruments may fix the auditory system, proprioception, allow you to be creative, and maybe help your eyesight at the same time. So
So you've got it's another one that and it can look really cool as well.
yes, that's it. It's my vision of having loads of Marshall lamps behind me. But I sound like I'm doing the right things. I just need to take up rock climbing now, right? So we sort of cover corrections and stuff. What do you tend to find is the biggest difference between, sort of, say, a dyslexic person and quote unquote a neurotypical person when they come to your practice for assessments and things like that? There's sometimes maybe certain visual cues, the way that they approach a visual task may or may not be different. So sometimes you may get them reading the letters from one direction rather than another direction. That happens occasionally, and sometimes the way that they process visual information, it may be different, it may not be. So we'd kind of I'd do kind of like a routine test, and then if I feel that there was something there, I might mention, is there anything that you've noticed? Or a lot of the people I may ask them beforehand anyway when they make the appointment. If they're coming in for something specific, or if they need a special test. Oh, okay. And because I noticed your website actually has a free scanning tool on the dyslexia page.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, that's actually quite a helpful tool, actually. So the British Dyslexia Association do recommend that you take a tool like that just to before even having an assessment for dyslexia.
Oh, okay.
Because there's sometimes if you have visual problems, it makes the diagnosis of dyslexia much worse. So if you can screen out all the vision problems first and correct those, then actually some of the symptoms can be much less.
Yes, yeah.
So they prefer to, because it's possible to get visual problems with no dyslexia, or dyslexia with no visual problems. Yeah. So it's kind of teasing apart too. Yeah. No, I could. That makes total sense, because I suppose the way I've heard it described in, I think it's the gift of dyslexia, where it's all about that your, as they refer to it as your mind's eye, it doesn't necessarily see what your actual real life eyes are seeing. So, yeah, I could see fixing a load of visual problems would get you quite far up the route of fixing some of the other kind of symptomatic stuff, like particularly with the reading stuff. Are you a fan of dyslexia fonts at all? I know, like, I'm dyslexic and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I think they definitely have a place there, because they the way that the letters are formed, it makes it easier for the visual system to make sense of the words and the letters. It adds a bit of grounding, and it helps some of the difficulties with visual processing. It helps those.
Yeah. But do you then find, do you even have customers come in that use it, and then as they go through your program, they start not needing it because you're kind of fixing the disorientation with the letters?
Yes and no. It could be both, actually.
Okay.
So sometimes it can be where there's more of a visual problem. Sometimes it could be where there's more of a processing issue, which you can't work on directly. So it could be either way, actually. But generally, they're quite helpful. They can be helpful. So there's no harm in using something that's kind of helpful, even when we've worked on some of the visual problems. It's a bit like, we got that kind of button that opens doors into the back. So, I mean, that was originally an accessibility aid, but actually it's helpful for everybody.
Yes. Now you can push a button to shut the boot of your car and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're kind of starting off as accessibility, then becomes actually kind of just a helpful tool.
Yes, yeah. Now I can see that with the fonts because it's quite useful, like Amazon Kindles and stuff support it, but I wondered how it affects people with, once they've got used to it, then if they read a letter from somebody else, obviously they can't just flip the written word into fonts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there may be some training elements in there that once you've got used to using your eyes with it, it may help. But that'll be interesting to research, actually.
Yeah. It's maybe because young dyslexic, but always at school wanted to fit in. So having the fonts and the coloured papers and stuff was kind of a bit awkward, and I was curious to see.
It's a difficult one at school because I mean stuff like copying from the board. If you're asked to copy a paragraph from the board, I mean it's the worst thing to ask a child to do.
Oh God, I remember I had an English lesson once, and the teacher for an hour solid narrated a novel to us, and we had to write it down by hand.
Yeah. I mean, what was the purpose of that?
I think to make my right wrist hurt, but
yeah, I think that was the only thing it probably did. It was not a helpful task at all.
The good bad old days. Matthew, if you can't keep up, copy off your friend next to you. So I'm a page behind, and what he was doing to mess with me was dropping swear words in the middle of the sentences. I know, screw out.
That's. I know and sometimes like we'll see kids and that's how they're kind of picked up, because they end up having to copy from their partner who's sitting next to them because they can't keep up. Yes,
that is literally it. Yeah, it's
like it's just you're making them do something really, really worse.
Yeah,
a real struggle for them.
Yeah, because that is going to fill them full of confidence.
yeah, exactly. It'll give them confidence. This is what the school environment is designed for. Finding the thing that you find that's really, really hard and just making you do it a lot.
Yeah, what they should do is send me rock climbing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it would have been definitely more effective. I mean, we've had kids within a few months actually have a huge improvement with their learning.
Yeah, that's the important thing, isn't it? Really, because. What is most of your clients? Do they tend to be, if they're dyslexic, tend to be children or adults?
It tends to be more kids than anything else, because we'll tend to see them around about the kind of diagnosis time.
Yeah.
Or what happens at school, because they're being tested at particular times, they'll be picked up because they're not performing up to what they're expected to do. So then we'll pick up a lot of kids at that time. They may have just either gone to secondary school and suddenly they're not keeping up, or something. So whatever these milestones are within the educational system where they're expected to perform at a particular level and they're not, then they'll be referred to us. And with adults, it will tend to be again mainly at a point of diagnosis, somewhere along the line. Something's been difficult for someone, and then someone's gone down, has been told, right, this is the route you have to go down and get a diagnosis of dyslexia or have an assessment for dyslexia.
Yeah, and I imagine particularly with the kids, once you've got their eyes, as you said, sorted, it helps with their learning as they're now not having all the problems that way. Do you find the kids respond better to your techniques than the adults, or do you have to approach it differently depending on?
It can be both. Some of them where they've already been faced with a lot of challenges, and this is just another challenge, and some take it well, some take it. It's like trying to get people to go to the gym,
yes.
Where you get some people who be regulars and work for adults and kids, while some will do it for a week, not get any progress, or wonder why things haven't improved after going just for a week, and then give up. While you get the ones who do it for 4 months, and they look back and they'll be better than they were when they first started.
Yeah. So basically, it's the personality of the individual more than their age.
I think so, and their own motivation, and if you're working on something that's already difficult for someone,
yes,
then there can be resistance there.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. You just need to keep no.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
No, it's kind of curious whether you sort of imagine kids are just soaking up, but I guess everybody has their own individual personality.
We get all sorts, yeah. And there's a lot of factors in play. Sometimes if there's some neurodiversity, there's other factors that may be there at the same time. Some may have a sensory issue as well, and they may not be able to tolerate things at the same time, or tolerate too much effort. Some may have weakness in their core strength, which can be difficult to work with. So they're all so different.
No 2 days the same then.
No, it is fascinating. I mean, we had two brothers.
Okay.
They've both got their own ways of doing things, and it's quite fascinating to see where one strength will be different to where the other one's strength is, or where one's weakness will be different to the other one's weakness.
Do you think that might be where the two of them helped each other out as children? They ended up just kind of splitting the responsibilities almost.
Yeah, they have thought, all right, this one can do this bit, so I'm going to do this bit. And so, maybe there's some element there.
Oh, it's because I see you're a glasses wearer yourself. Have you actually had to do any behavioural stuff to your optometry to yourself at all?
Yeah, I mean, I do, yes. So actually, as I learn the techniques, I'll practice them all on myself. There's a kind of, if you do kind of, we call it vision therapy, but actually, when you do therapy, you do it on yourself first.
Oh, do you?
Before you do it on anybody else. So actually, a lot of the exercise and techniques I'll learn on myself first, and improve the way that the eyes are working together, particularly, and the way that they focus. So, I will test everything, and my kids often get guinea pigs as well.
Yeah, I bet they've got the best eyesight going, right?
So, touch wood. So far, it's been quite good.
Yeah, I can imagine. Right, come in. I want to try this technique now, and
Oh God, you've been on a course again.
I've come back with all of these ideas.
Yeah.
I know. It's been fascinating actually hearing how it all kind of, and it's something that surprises me the more I sort of dig heavier into the neurodiversity and the dyslexia world, how things are there to help you. It's just curious because obviously I'm 37 and starting to hear about these techniques in the last 12 months. And that might be just to do with the age I went through the school system. Is it more of a thing out there now than it used to be, or is it still very much kind of a bit of a smaller thing, do you think?
I mean, I think that there's definitely more awareness. I think that there could be more awareness of what to do to help people.
Yes.
But I think that there's maybe less of a stigma than there was before as well.
Definitely.
And I think there's people understand it a little bit more now, and finding interventions and finding accessibility ways to help them. Technology can help a lot as well. That there's lots of new tools that are available. So I think generally things are moving in a good direction.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's just not fast enough.
No, I agree. I didn't even, until I put a shout out for guests and you replied, I was like, what's a behavioural optometrist? Dived on your website. I was like, do I not know about these things? I so would have booked myself in for one of these.
I think we don't advertise ourselves enough, really, or try and spread the word out, really.
Yeah, definitely, because I can imagine even for neurotypical people who've got lazy eyes and all of the other kind of stuff that goes on with the visual system that may not be working for them, or they have a nasty habit of constantly walking into things. I can imagine you can help quite a bit with stuff like that.
Yeah, so I may see a child, and then the parent may say, I struggle to park the car, and then we know that there may be something that's going on there.
Yeah, I've got all these bruises on my shin from the edge of the sofa and the dining table that's never moved for 10 years. Yeah. Do you end? I imagine that's quite good for repeat work when you talk to a child and the parents like, "Oh, hang on, I have that."
Sometimes it does. It can be a learning for the parents themselves.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I imagine you help them on their journey as well. So,
of course.
Yeah. So, how long did you say you've been a behavioural optometrist?
So, behavioural optometrist, I've been about 10 years. And then about 10 years before then, I was a kind of a routine optometrist.
And it's been your own practice the last 10 years?
Yeah. So I had to be able to do this kind of work, I had to be independent.
Okay. Feel free to plug what your practice is and where people can find you.
So my practice is Central Vision Opticians in North London, in Finchley. And our website is www.centralvisionopticians.co.uk. And if you use /dyslexia on there, it'll take you to the page about dyslexia.
Thank you. So, and I'll put that in the show notes, which will be available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. I'm going to sort of launch into, I'm trying to develop some rapid fire questions for this podcast at the end of it, because I listen to far too much Tim Ferriss. Let's see. Let's start with question number one. What is a prejudice you had about dyslexia that has been proven wrong?
I think firstly, that it's not a visual problem.
Yes.
I think that's the biggest thing, that there's been all these reports and as to what's happened. In the past, there have been loads of theories about why someone's dyslexic. And I think understanding there's a difference between a visual problem and dyslexia. Okay.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I remember seeing a documentary the BBC did years and years ago. I think they called it "I'm Not Stupid," and it had an EastEnders actress on it, I think, and it was sort of showing the words, but like bright light from the page and all moving around, and that did make it feel very visual. And I was watching it, thinking, I don't really get any of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but it's not a visual problem, but having visual problems. It can,
and more likely.
Yeah, more likely.
You're more likely to have visual problems. Yeah.
So that's where you come in, fix the visual problems, and then we can look at the dyslexia.
And then we can look at the dyslexia. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, if an alien come down, how would you describe dyslexia to them?
I would say it's a difficulty in decoding the symbols that make up the language. So the way that the language is encoded into symbols, it's difficult to turn those symbols back into a language.
Yes. Have you had any multilingual people in your practice? Because it's interesting seeing how dyslexia is affects in different languages, like some of the pattern languages. It's almost not a thing.
Yeah. So if you've got a pictorial language, for example, it's a lot less likely. Italians, for some reason, lends itself very well to dyslexia as a language.
Does it?
The writing is a lot more phonetic.
Yeah.
So they're less likely to get diagnosed.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
So and I think the Mandarin, the pictorial Mandarin, because it's very representative, right, as opposed to being a sound. We try to turn sounds into letters, but in hieroglyphics or in Mandarin, you're trying to turn pictures into concepts, which are much easier to understand.
Yes, and being a picture thinker, you're already thinking on them lines anyway. So, hey, there's a picture, I get this.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, rather than the British language, it's a little bit of a hodgepodge of multiple languages put together. Which is...
and it's the rules just don't work at all in some of the sounds and languages.
No.
It's a really not a phonetic language, and there's so many words that don't fit in with the rules.
Yes, you learn the rule, and then the next rule is that the rule does not apply in these situations.
Exactly.
But I haven't even got the rule down yet. Come on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's quite funny. So my last question, seeing as this is a Dyslexia Life Hacks podcast, Any life hacks?
Oh, life hacks.
Particularly for dyslexia, but obviously you're not dyslexic yourself. So.
Yeah. So I mean, I've said the rock climbing and the playing music, color coding, drawing. I think would be an interesting one as well, because you can represent thoughts and ideas and within a drawing.
Yes.
It doesn't even have to be like, it doesn't have to be Picasso or Michael, or maybe might be more likely to be like Picasso than say some of the other artists. But actually, if you just you can put ideas better in drawing sometimes as well. So that
yes,
playing a game of Pictionary or something like that may be a good way to kind of expand those communication skills.
Yes, I see what you mean. Yeah, you can visually write it, visually put it down rather than have to deal with the words. And I need to do more of that.
Yeah, so it might be another way to process information.
Yes, I agree. So I don't know, I think that's really interesting. I think that's a good place to leave it. Thank you very much for coming on. Is there
pleasure.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, that's all. It's all fascinating. It's a great way to understand how people kind of use the world, how they use their eyes for information, and it's a fascinating field.
Yeah, certainly important, as you only get two sets of eyes, and they do a lot of work for you.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And I want to thank everybody else for listening. Remember that show notes will be posted on dyslexialifehacks.com, and I hope you guys can enjoy the rest of the site while you're on there. Thank you very much.